Now, it was very difficult sometimes. It would be sleighing out there in the woods because there'd be no traffic and there'd be wood wheels around town. And so you'd have to transfer a load, leave the sleighs out there and bring the rest of the load in here. And sometimes even around town here, the wheels would be sinking, 6 inches into the snow, and it'd be pretty hard wheeling.
And what kind of wheels? You mean horse-drawn wagons?
Yeah.
And then they'd go from there. Was it mainly firewood, or was it wood going to Buchanan's mill?
No,
or?
That was after my time. I can just remember the sawmill there. I can remember hearing it, but I was never around there. But I can remember a great big stack of old slabs, I suppose it was, built up there so that the barges could come in and load there. But there's no sign of that anymore. It's all disappeared, rotted out, I suppose.
Uh-huh. And the wood that you, like, let's say
we just peddled the firewood around town.
Okay, so when you were going out to do the firewood, you'd often go out by the airstrip there, or?
And we turned down left at the airstrip, and we had a woodlot down in there.
Up Björknes Creek probably, or?
No, it was right down level.
Right down.
I don't know. I don't imagine the road would be in there anymore. I know Englishes took poles out of there at one time because we found one, and it was just blue. It was so hard, it had been the bark had been stripped off, and it was up off the ground, and it was hard. It was lovely tamarack. I just remember that.
And your dad and yourself and a brother, or how many were you when you'd go out? How many were?
I was the oldest one, and I was always selected for any bull work. I was selected. Some of the rest of them had more brains, and they went to school, but I.
Okay, so you go out there and you'd take a sled with how many horses?
Just a team.
Just a team, a pair.
And you bring in a cord a trip, 2 cords a day. $10 a cord, which would pay for a man and a team. I suppose it would be fairly good money because a man and a team would draw $10 a day.
Okay, so the price might even have been as low as $5 a cord.
Right. Yeah. I remember bringing in one load, and in those days, you fill the bunks from, there's one log. We brought it in for a cord of wood, and to us, it was 16 feet long, and that would make a cord of wood, and to us, it seemed to be a tremendous log, but with trucks and the high-speed equipment that they have now, it'd be just nothing to it.
And of course you'd be looking for mostly large tamarack, standing dead, or was it mixed wood you were going for?
No, we wouldn't bring anything in but the fir and tamarack, and maybe birch, but very, very seldom would you bring any birch in.
And your dad's name?
Fred Spiers.
Fred Spiers. When did he come to Kaslo, Jack?
When he was a boy, he went to school here.
When do you figure that was? You were born when? You were born?
Well, he was 21 years old when he was married, and about 10 months later, I arrived on the scene.
Yeah.
And I was born in 7, so...
So he'd have been 22 in 1907, so he'd...
yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and he came here when he was a boy, so he was very, very early resident, probably the 1880s.
I remember him telling me, coming in from Vancouver Island on the boat, they brought in steerage rather, they're pretty poor, but seeing the salmon running in the Fraser River, you could almost walk on them. There were not many in the Fraser River in those days. He said, I thought they were young whales, but they're just salmon coming up the river.
Uh-huh. And your earliest recollections are living in Upper Kaslo. You were...
No, my earliest recollections were up in Argenta.
Oh.
My dad rented a farm up there from Alpo. No, what's the name? Immediate. I'll think of it in a minute.
Mm-hmm. So
he rented a farm up there.
yeah. And he was farming the land as well as doing woodlot work?
No,
or-
I don't imagine he was doing any hauling in those days.
Mm-hmm.
He had cattle up there,
Uh-huh.
and he used to ship his young stock down here to a couple that were running a restaurant, and they were living the high life and living off him, and they didn't pay him for any of the cattle, so he didn't have any money next spring to pay for his rent, and so he lost the place.
Mm-hmm. That was probably right in the thick of the 1890s boom, eh? That
I
was
suppose,
happening, yeah.
The same farm that the Quakers farm now.
Mm-hmm.
The house is still there, in fact.
Uh-huh.
I can still remember the house sitting up on a hill, sitting up high.
Yeah, I think I know the one right where the turnoff, where between Argenta one way and Johnson's Landing the other
That's
way.
right,
You go
yeah.
to Argenta and
You
it's the
go up
one
the-
that
you
Sean
go up the
Hennessy
hill
lives
there.
in. Yeah. That's a beautiful place.
Yeah. But my earliest remembrance is running my brother on a push cart out onto the jetty and falling off, and my dad pulling me out of the water. He said I was going down for the third time when you can imagine the screaming and the hollering that going on.
You had a lucky start.
Topsy, I had lots of coffee.
You didn't. I've been waiting.
When your dad left Argenta and you came to Kaslo, he went into the cordwood business right away?
I don't know. He had a team. His dad had given him a team and a wagon for a wedding present.
Uh-huh.
And I know he was working around town with a team when our house burned down, where the post office is now.
Uh-huh.
And I could just barely remember that Mrs. Can't think of her name right now. One of the neighbors picked me up and took me over to her place in the morning. My sister couldn't speak yet. That was the third one in the family, and she couldn't speak. But she took Mother's by the skirt and showed her the fire starting upstairs.
Mm-hmm. So everybody got out,
Everybody got
but
out,
the
but-
house was a write-off.
It was right off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't suppose there's any insurance. I don't imagine he owned the house, so it was somebody else's house. But I can remember them hauling at first schoolhouse where Billy Dunn is now. I don't know who lives there now. It's kitty corner from the hospital.
Yeah.
Hauling the schoolhouse up there and putting it to where our house used to be, or where our former house was. Francis lives there now.
Yeah.
And hauling it up there with 4 horses on skids.
Wow. That's a big place for 4 horses
no.
on skids.
Oh, no, it was just a one-room schoolhouse in those days.
Okay. All right.
I think they had hauled it up with block and tackle, but they did haul it up that way.
Uh-huh. So by the time you started working with your dad, you were probably, what, 9?
Oh, I was quit school, I kicked out of school when I was about 15,
Mm-hmm.
14 or 15.
Mm-hmm. And you worked, basically, was it broad axis or?
Oh, no, we didn't do any hewing at all.
Okay.
No, this is just providing wood. But I can remember going up to one of the mines the other side of the Lucky Gym, going way up there, and he told me afterwards that Mother was just so mad because she had to walk up there. There were 3 of us kids. Yeah, there's 3 of us kids there, and she had to walk up because he had all the pots and pans and all the food for us, going up there, and he would be hauling ore down to the tracks. K&S, I guess, but in those days. Because I can remember going down there, the excursion that the CPR put on when the first train went through to the cusp, the CPR, and being so terribly scared. That engine coming straight at me, come right up the track there, and boy, I can remember screaming and hollering and hiding behind my aunt's skirts to get away from it.
And did...
we went up to the Utica one summer too.
So the team was basically your dad's livelihood then? And it was not only used for cordwood, but also for supplies to and from the mining camps.
Yeah, I know he hauled a lot of ore from the Cork province with 4 horses. And in those wagons in those days, they would sit up 8-10 feet above the road, and they would have to be strapped in, because the one foot would be on the brake and the other foot would be bracing, and it would be strapped into the seat, and it was a seat molded so that you couldn't slip out of it. He had four lines in his hands, and you had to be looking what you're doing.
Yeah, seat belted right in.
Seat belted right in. Just with one leg, of course.
Yeah. And they were basically just wooden wheeled, or was there any hard rubber on the outside, or that came way later?
All steel wheels.
Steel wheels.
And in the slippery times, they would have they have big brake blocks, but they would have a steel insert to put into the brake block so that it would be steel against steel, and they could skid their wheels any old time. They had that much power on their brakes, but that would only be on the rear wheels, of course. It'd be 5 and 6 ton on a wagon, but it had to be very well braced. They'd have steel on the reach and all this sort of thing.
Okay. 2-man saws.
2-man saws, yeah.
And you and your dad would be out there, and you were saying that you'd get 2 cords of wood loaded and back into town in a day, and that's each trip being 1 cord, so you'd make 2 trips. You mentioned something about once about your dad having worked on the new hospital, or providing wood for maybe I...
No, that would be my grandfather. What did he did all the hauling for some big project. It's in one of the histories anyway.
What was his name?
James A. Andrew. James Andrew.
And so your dad was second generation liveryman, I guess, is what they call him?
Livery was more of a delivery around town. That's wood livery. You read out horses and wagons and things like that. I remember the last of the pack trains came through here. They're coming down the South Fork, someplace that I can remember them coming into town. Maybe 10 or 15 head of horses, and one in front and the other bringing up the rear. And I can remember him, the one in the rear, whistling, and everything stopped right there, and they went back, and one of the packs had slipped a little bit, and they went back and straightened that out, and away they went again. Pretty well organized.
And the horses would probably carry, what, 70, 120, 200, 300 pounds? How much did a good horse carry? Do you think?
I don't really know. 300-400 pounds anyway. A lot of that would be, they would sack ore. A lot of the mines didn't have roads up there, so they'd have to pack all the ore out in sacks. And they'd pack it down to the main road, and then they would haul it in from there.
So your cordwood customers, were they businesses or people or both, or did you have a regular?
No. It's here's the phone, the 36R, and they phoned up and said, we need a load of wood, and yeah, I'll give it to you so-and-so and such a time.
Uh-huh.
But after that, it'd have to be sawn up, and there was no skill saws or chainsaws or anything else in those days. You got busy on a saw.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you didn't cut it into 16-inch lengths. Everyone did that on their own. You just provided them with 16-foot lengths. Was the longest.
12-foot length.
12 was the longest.
My brother and I had to cut all the wood for the year.
Mm-hmm.
We got $5 a piece if we had it done before the 24th of May. Well, the 23rd of May was pretty a full day's work for us because, being kids
and of course that was the big May Day celebration
yeah,
too.
that was a big day in Kaslo.
Yeah.
The Nelson baseball team came up and played the Kaslo and made a rivalry.
Mm-hmm. Did you have much care that you did you care for the horses, or was that mainly something your dad did himself?
Oh, that was him.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I never had a team of my own. I've worked with teams around town, sometimes with his, sometimes I'd rent a team and be plowing and use somebody else's equipment. My grandfather always had plows and harrows and things like that, and I would use those. But mostly they were not big garden plot people that dig them up themselves.
Uh-huh.
I remember the Chinese had a lovely garden down there, and they used to come around town with baskets over their shoulder, with a carrying stick over their shoulder, and they would have lettuce, carrots, and all this sort of thing early in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them they were very, very good people, the Chinese in those days. My dad said once that he had, they had some dope anyway, because he said he had smoked it a couple of times.
Mm-hmm. Opium, probably.
I think, yes,
Yeah.
I think like the opium. He said he'd tried it a couple of times, but it didn't stick with him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how many Chinese families were there in Kaslo then?
The last Chinese people that I remember, families, were Chow Wongs down there, and they had a laundry.
Uh-huh.
Because my sister was very friendly with one of the girls.
Mm-hmm.
They're all very good people. I always admired the Chinese.
Mm-hmm. So, let's say when you were young here in Kaslo, I imagine the pace of growth was such that there was a lot of construction going on.
It was going down in those days.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Because the mining boom had pretty well petered out.
Yeah.
There's a few of the mines going, but no, the Whitewater went for years after that, and so did the Cork province. But the rest of them, outside of Sandon, I don't know very much about Sandon.
Mm-hmm.
But the Jim, Lucky Jim, they went for a good many years. But
Mm-hmm.
there are the three mines around in the local district that was very active.
Mm-hmm. And after, for most of your working time in Kaslo, you were working with horses, whether it was plowing or doing cordwood.
I worked underground, I'd work
Mm-hmm.
doing whatever. Just won't work, no brains.
No, I wouldn't say that.
No, I would.
It wasn't that what most of the people did in those days? I mean,
You-
a job was a job, right? And
Punk
Yeah.
Hendricks, who became Bob Hendricks, one
Mhm.
of the big shots over in Kameko,
Yeah.
he went to school in the same class. Jack Scott was the Anglican minister's son, and he went on down in the West Indies someplace. I think he got to be a bishop.
Mhm.
And so some of them had some brains, but
well, some of them kept on with their schooling. That
That's
doesn't
right.
necessarily.
Gib Mervyn, he worked for McLennan McFeely prior out at the coast, and he retired. I think he's over in the Okanagan. Whether he's still alive or not, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
some of us just enjoyed working with our hands, and
Yes.
so we didn't bother.
Yeah, yeah. And there was always lots of work for someone who was a good
yes.
worker in those days.
Full strength and awkwardness.
Yeah.
That's what they used to call us.
Uh-huh.
But, we took an interest in our work, and we enjoyed it, and it had to be done. There wasn't any ditch diggers or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. How were the woodlots administered back then?
I think he bought it for a limited length of time, but Howland and Walsh came in here, and they were big shots.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to raise hell and put a chip under it.
Uh-huh.
And they went in big, and I think they had the first big heavy-duty trucks. And I can remember, what was his name, the superintendent anyway, coming along. His son had been driving one of these with one of these trucks with a tandem behind him, and just how it followed along behind the front wheels, and they were very happy to it. They had a big storage area up at South Fork, on the flats there at South Fork, and they would just wear the logs out, just hauling from one place to another. They were very inefficient. They had about 1 million board feet of logs. The other side of Leeds, halfway down to Mirror Lake, off to the left, they had a great big pile there, and because of lawsuit, it all rotted, and people from Kaslo went out there and they got wood for years and years until it all rotted.
Mm-hmm.
But they're very efficient, and they had vast woodlots right up the South Fork, out towards the True Blue.
And were they mainly looking for pine or the whitewood?
Saw logs.
Saw logs. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
That's all they took.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Was there they were supplying the mills on the lake, were they? Or did they have?
I think most of it went across the line.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't be sure, but I think most of it went across the line.
So there was people making up booms and taking the logs straight across. Uh-huh.
But in those days, too, Topsy, my wife, speaks of being able to get their wintered wood just from the saw logs that would bounce out of the booms, and you'd get them up on the beach, and then they would haul them up and cut them up for their own wood. They didn't have to take any of their own wood.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these were first-class logs too, you know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
We'd have gone in jail if they'd caught us.
Oh, I don't know. Once they'd gone out, there was no salvagers or beachcombers in those days, were there? Just the people.
There was in the 50s.
Uh-huh.
I don't know about that much.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have to pour your own coffee in.
Yeah. How old were you when you first left Kaslo?
Oh, I have the faintest idea.
Mm-hmm.
How old was I when I went to work for your dad, Topsy?
You were 23 then.
I had been over to Trail, and I worked there for about 9 months, 7 months or something like that. And then I had worked around, there was quite a bit of work here. And then the Depression hit, and the South Fork, the Cork province closed down about that time. And so I was thrown on my own, and I went up prospecting for the Kameko in the north with Henry Gigrich, and he had a crew out there with him. And from there I went over doing assessment work for the Kameko in northern Alberta. No, northern BC.
Mm-hmm.
And from there I went, I don't remember where I went from there, but then I went, this is anything to do with forestry, but then I had a job, the box property in northern Saskatchewan, working in the shaft, and I did all kinds of jobs from there on, running diesels and things like that.
And you started concentrating more on the mining.
Yeah, that's right. And I'd spent a winter out at the coast taking a diesel course, and so I knew something about diesels, and so I got a chance to run diesels and maintain them.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. and fix them.
Oh, well,
Also, were you
this is-
mechanic on diesels?
This is mostly heavy duty, and you didn't
Yeah.
have very much fixing. They ran for years, and
Yeah.
so you didn't have very much fixing. But
Mhm.
maybe one cylinder, two cylinders, things like that. I think there's one with 4 cylinders.
Mhm.
Oh,
And that was like the workhorse for all the mines. Do you remember any brand names, the kind of machinery they used?
Fairbanks Morris was one.
Uh-huh.
Then the Cameco put in a power out of Tazen Lake. I'm looking at that in the map here a little while ago. Yes, it was Tazen Lake, and there was so much unrotted, what would you call it, wood. It was just, it wouldn't settle, it wouldn't anything. They had an awful job with it for a while, because
It was on the lake floating?
it was underneath the lake floating, and it never integrated because the weather was so cold, the water was so cold that it didn't have a chance to rot.
Uh-huh.
But they got their power in from there, and so after that they didn't need diesels anymore.
Mhm.
I think they ran them for a while, but then they closed that property down too during the start of the war. They're very happy. They lost a lot of money on that. It cost them about several millions of dollars. They only took $180,000 out the first year.
Mhm.
You know, when it was close to the surface. So.
Yeah, yeah. So that seems to be a very common theme in the mines around here. The surface enrichment, the things started off really great, and then as soon as you got down, it wasn't as rich an ore.
Not only that, they sold stock. It was a stock proposition.
Mhm.
The Montezuma, that was a stock proposition. They put in a tramway. They did all kinds of things, but they hardly shipped a thing. They had a mill in there, halfway up to between the Cork province and the South Fork itself. And then the what was the mill site? What, the Joker
The
mill
Joker,
site.
yeah.
That was a stock proposition.
Mm-hmm.
But there was mines all the way up the South Fork there on the east side of. There wasn't anything except the one Montezuma on the right side, as far as I can remember.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Topsy did when, like you started out, so Topsy's dad came from the West Indies.
Well, yes, he was English.
Uh-huh.
And they had a big estate there, and what do you say, 3 or 4 villages, Topsy?
Yeah.
And that was that sized
Mhm.
operation, you know. And he said, told me once he's coming into town one day, and he thought he should sell that place. And he went in and lifted it for sale.
Dearie, but I'm not Kaslo all the time.
We're not looking for Kaslo old timer. This is Kootenai.
He wants to know something that he can.
Yeah, tell me something about the early forests over in Crawford Bay. That's where you were.
Yeah, well, the only thing, you see, before 1949, when I came back after the
Mhm.
war,
Mhm.
I came back in March, and Dad had died in 44, but I was overseas. And so then I came back in 49. And then I married Joe Gunther in the winter of 49, and we went pioneering out to Pilot Bay and bought the old farm at Pilot Bay.
Uh-huh.
And he was a logger and a prospector.
Mm-hmm.
So we really made our living working in the bush.
Uh-huh. And the logging in 1949 over there was, it was probably at that time the first chainsaws, those big things were starting to...
Oh, you mean the big 2-man chainsaw?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had one of those.
Uh-huh.
And wouldn't you rather have
Good.
that?
Yeah.
If he wants to suffer, Topsy, let him
Mhm.
suffer.
Okay, so he would, was your were you right on Pilot Bay? Like, were you on the water there?
Well, we were 2 miles out of Kootenai Bay towards Pilot Bay. Yes, the
Uh-huh.
farm was right on the water.
So
That's
you'd be
up.
trying to get the wood into the lake?
No.
No?
No,
No.
it was all hauled
All
by
haul
trucks
roads.
there.
Mm-hmm.
But don't forget, after the war, and all the boys coming back, there were a lot of them going logging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one thing you could do, you could buy a nice lot in a land sale, tax sale,
Mm-hmm.
and then you log it off and let it go back.
Mm-hmm.
I know one lot that did that. We didn't, because
Mhm.
we had 200 acres and then we bought 300 more.
Mm-hmm.
So we had 500 acres altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it had been logged by the Duke of Boers because they'd been logging through the war, and they had come into Kootenai Bay about, I would imagine, around 47, and were logging up around Lime Lake and through there. And we bought one lot that they had had, but logging was the thing then, and we made poles, we made fence posts, and we cut saw logs.
And you cut what?
Saw logs.
Saw logs. Uh-huh.
But then in those days, we could ship, we were hauling with horses, my voice is terrible. And so we cut 12-foot when they were very big on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went up to 60 feet for the smaller ones.
Mm-hmm.
But we wouldn't look at anything like 3/4 of what they're shipping now. We wouldn't cut them.
No, it's got to be
Because they're-
good wood in those
Because
days.
they're running about 26, 30 to the 1,000. We wouldn't look at them.
Mm-hmm.
But then we,
What was the preferred wood back then? Was still fir?
well, white pine that was going to Nelson,
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
Eddie Match Factory.
Yeah.
And was it Eddie or Powell's?
It was Powell's.
Powell's.
Yeah.
And we got the biggest price in there, and we got a big price for poles,
Uh-huh.
especially if they
Cedar
were big
poles.
ones. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But that was just a winter. You would cut them in the winter, and you could leave them lay, but when the sap started to run in the spring, you just had 2 weeks to clean that bark off before it gripped again.
Mm-hmm.
So the main part was you were cutting them in the spring.
And hauling them didn't take the bark off. They had to all be stripped.
Oh,
But
they
if you
had
caught
to
the
be
sap
stripped.
right on those big old cedars,
Oh,
it
yeah,
just
boy, isn't
nothing
it a
to.
joy?
Yeah,
Just a
it's wonderful
joy.
the way it
But that
comes
would be all
out.
down timber that you'd strip.
No, well, any poles that you cut in the spring, you'd have to strip. But you could cut them in the winter.
That's
and
what I
clean
mean.
them. Yeah, but that was a heck of a rush in the spring
Yeah.
before they seized up again. And
Well,
I have an idea that the second year you could do it too, if you hadn't got them all done the first year.
Mhm.
But you'd have to be careful how they were stacked.
You'd have them on skidways anyway, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
Mhm.
but that was quite a job. And then Joe got one of the first 2 men chainsaws.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't help him with them because they
Too
were
heavy,
too
yeah.
heavy. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I could pull.
Real vibration.
Oh,
but-
yes. So he'd get somebody else to help him. But
Mhm.
hauling them through the bush was something else again.
Uh-huh.
You know?
How long would they be, Topsy?
They were about 4 or 5 feet, weren't they?
Yeah, this is some of the pictures I've seen of
Yeah.
the old saws were just crazy. They must have weighed almost 100 pounds.
Oh, they were
At least.
heavy,
Yeah.
very heavy.
Oh, were they?
Mm.
Oh, yeah. 2-man saws.
I remember the saws, the falling saws out at the coast,
Uh-huh.
and the saw would be tucked in the ground on both sides of your shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, they had to have room on both ends, you know, to move it. But I can still remember because I was just a green kid going out there and never seen anything like that before.
Mhm.